In this video, we go over your FPL drafts. We rate whether you've picked the right players and try and help you to have the best Fantasy Premier League start to your FPL 2022-23 season. All of that coming up next. What the flock is going on, and welcome to this Your FPL Draft video where we rate your sides and have a discussion in the comments down below about players we need to be getting into our starting 11s. So if you enjoy the content on this channel, which we have been doing daily, please do subscribe and hit that like button, as well as getting involved in the comments down below. And we start off with Shaquille 91301. And we are looking at a 5 at the back team with 2-man midfield and 3 players up front. We start off with Raya in goal, which is a very popular pick. However, Shaquille, really hope I haven't butchered the saying of that name, is signing for Brentford, which could hurt Raya's starting time. Although from what I've heard, sources have told me Raya is still the number 1. I just doubt Shaquille would go there if he thought he wasn't going to get that much game time. The 5 at the back, you do have Alexander-Arnold and Robertson, who of course are great Fantasy Premier League options and often outscore midfielders of the same price bracket. And joining him is Perisic and Doherty. So we've got a double-double in defence of Spurs and Liverpool. We then got Trippier joining as well. Of course, we all think that Newcastle's trajectory is going to continue to go up as they sign more quality players. And overall, that defence is very, very solid. I don't think you're going to have many issues with any of them. Although, to be honest, Doherty, with the injury, we're going to see how he comes back from that injury that saw him miss the end of last season. So I wouldn't be too keen on Doherty myself if you can afford to go to the likes of Reece James and maybe even Chilwell. I think that way you cover your bases a little bit more, just in case Spurs don't have a great start to the season. Then having midfield, Mohamed Salah, I think everyone is pretty much putting him into their starting 11s now. And I know I got some stick for a video where I didn't include him, but it was a limited draft video just to showcase something to you all. Not my actual team, but we'll move on from that. And Martinelli, I like the idea of Martinelli, but there is still a little bit of me that's concerned he won't be a starting or regular starting player and minutes might be an issue. And then up front, we have Vardy, Jesus and Haaland. Now, seasons gone by, I'd have looked at Vardy and said, yes, he's a must-have for your starting 11s. But Leicester's opening fixtures aren't the best. I do really like Jesus and Haaland, of course. They are in my own draft. Vardy, I'm not too sure he's worth the money that he comes in at the moment. So I personally have been going for either 4-4-2 or I've been looking at 5-3-2, but I can't really see 3 strikers that I want unless I could somehow afford Kane and Haaland while still having Salah in midfield. As for your bench, the issue I have with 5-2-3 is the fact that you have had to go with 3 £4.5 million midfielders, and unfortunately £4.5 million midfielders aren't always the strongest options. There can be decent ones that do come to the fore, but I think if you had more positions for defenders, even if it's just 1 and you played 4 at the back, you could get starting players that are defenders for 4 million, saving you some budget for your starting 11. That's why I'm not too fond of the 5-2-3 myself, because I do look at that bench and think it isn't particularly strong as far as in case one of your starting 11 doesn't start. But otherwise, starting 11 I do like the look of overall. It's mainly just Vardy and Martinelli that I'd be a bit iffy about, and I'm not too sure myself on double Spurs defence, but I do like Perisic. We move on to the next team, and it's Bajay. I'm not even going to try and say the rest of that because I will just make a mess of it. But Bajay's team, that is his @ on Twitter. We can see we start off with Mendy in goal. Now, a lot of people are going Mendy. I think it's become even more of a popular choice with the whole Raya and Shaquille situation at Brentford. Now, look, £5 million for a Chelsea goalkeeper is always going to be good value. I personally like to try and pick the best budget goalkeeper because then save points do come into the equation as well, whereas Mendy may not have as many saves as some of the cheaper goalkeepers to make. We've got another 5 at the back and a 4-man midfield. Instead of the 5-2-3, it's a 5-4-1. Again, we've got some familiar names here in Alexander-Arnold and Perisic, along with Trippier, but we do have one cheap defender in Tomiyasu at 4.5 million, which I do really like as an option because it is an Arsenal defender for 4.5 million pounds, and Arsenal might find good defensive form like they did at times last season. And then we've also got Cancelo, who was one of the highest scoring players in the game last season, and I think you get that Man City coverage there with Cancelo in case of the clean sheets, and also he has the possibility of getting assists as well. So I do really like Cancelo. For me, Trent and Cancelo are two almost must-haves in your defence. We've then got Salah and Son with Haaland up front. And this draft does tempt me because from my first draft video, which I got slated for because I spent so much on Salah, Son and Haaland, people said my team wasn't strong. But I look at this team and I think that is a strong starting 11. Don't like having so many defenders. I could see why you'd disagree. But Salah and Son were the top goal-scoring players last season. They're both fantastic options, and they're both my favoured options, realistically, if I just wasn't scared of Haaland's ownership. Martinelli and Neto are very popular midfielders. Again, I've already spoken about Martinelli, and I do like Neto as a punt at 5.5 million. And Haaland, with that ownership so high, it's just one of those risks. Are you willing to take the risk of not owning him, and then he does amazingly well? I prefer this bench purely because I think Andreas could be a starting midfielder for Fulham. But again, because we've gone so heavy at the back, I feel like the bench options aren't as strong. So if something does happen to your starting 11, that could be an issue there. But you do have Andreas to come in midfield if something does go awry, because I believe he'll be a starter for Fulham. So again, like this side. We then got Saint FPL side, and the first thing that stands out to me, we'll start back at the goalkeeper after this point, is Mahrez. If Mahrez can nail down a starting 11 place, I do think he can actually score very well in that Manchester City side with the likes of Haaland's 2 assists, and he is also a player that can have some games where he scores quite a few goals. I still think there'll be Pep Roulette, so I do think that Man City midfielders are a bit risky, but I just have an affinity for Riyad Mahrez after that Leicester title-winning season where I owned Mahrez for most of the season. So going back to the goalkeeper position, Meslier, I actually think Jesse Marsch has improved that Leeds defence, so he could be an option. He's not the option I've been drawn to myself, but I can't really argue with it. I just feel like there's potentially better goalkeepers to go for. Alexander-Arnold and Cancelo, I've spoken about them already, great choices. Tomiyasu, again, a good cheap way into that Arsenal defence. And Johnny, I like the idea of Johnny, I'm just not sold by Wolves' defence. I don't know why. I used to have a lot of faith in Wolves' defence, and then last season happened and it kind of slipped away. But Johnny is a good player that did get attacking returns when he was a regular starter before an injury took him out. So I do think he could be a good option. We have Salah, again, great option as always. I've already spoken about Mahrez, but joined by Luis Diaz and Saka, another 2 £8 million midfielders. I suppose the plus point of this is if one of these does really hit the ground running and have a great start to the season, you're already on that £8 million midfielder because there's great value there. It's just about picking the right one that will do well this season. This way, you've already got 3 of them. And if you want to go to a different one, like say Maddison or Mount, it shouldn't be too difficult for you to do that. So I like that kind of setup. However, I do feel like you're missing another premium in this lineup. You do have Jesus and Wilson up front. Wilson injury proneness always scares me a little bit, and although I'm excited about Gabriel Jesus, the fact is we don't know how well he will do in his new side, but I think Jesus is still a player worth taking a punt on. But if you suddenly need to get in the likes of Son, Kane or Haaland, it might be a little bit difficult to get there. As for the bench, I like Gordon and I like Nico Williams here because I think both will be starters, so you have bench cover there that can come in case something happens to your starting 11. I think I'm just generally going to say most of these drafts are good, but I suppose a lot of us are picking from the same pool of players that we really think are valuable to us at the beginning of the season. And then we've got the final team, and it is Malcolm R. Brown 53's team. And we've got another 4-4-2 here with Kane and Jesus up front, which I cannot argue with at all. Kane has pedigree in the Premier League and we know what he can do. Jesus, again, at a new club, but has shown enough that I think he's worth the punt. And Salah and Luis Diaz, I think are good options in midfield. I have Diaz in my starting 11, but there's a little bit of me that's not sold on him, although I was so pro him earlier on in the week. I looked at his stats again, and whilst he has performed well. I'm not sure his stats are as high as I'd like him to be to triple up on Liverpool. I think I prefer Robertson and Trent myself. That being said, you have Bowen as well. 8.5 million. I suppose that's to do with the fact that he scored over 200 points and was one of the top scoring players last year in FPL. I feel like that's a bit too high for my liking now, though, on Jarrod Bowen. I could see him maybe still doing well next year, but can he have a season that repeats his exploits of last season? I'm not too sure about that. And then Longstaff is in your starting 11. I would prefer someone a bit better than Longstaff in my starting 11 personally, but I see that he's there to allow for the rest of the team. In defence, we've got Cash, who I think is a great option if Aston Villa have a good start. Cash will probably perform very well. Laporte instead of Cancelo, that gets you that Man City coverage, although I would always prefer Cancelo. And you've got Doherty and Robertson. I'd prefer the punt of Perisic. That's just a personal take. But Doherty, we know, has had great FPL seasons. And I think Trent's the better option than Robertson season long, but Robertson's definitely capable of keeping up with, and at times in the season, outscoring Trent. And Mendy in goal is, again, that nice way into Chelsea's defence for 5 million, which is pretty good value. On the bench, you do have Johnny. I personally might start Johnny over Longstaff myself. And then you've got Downs and Brozier. Of course, we're hoping for a Brozier move to make him really viable as a FPL asset. So, again, decent side. I think there's a few things that can be tinkered there. Hopefully, I've helped all 4 of you out with your starting 11s and given you some food for thought and some transfers that you can possibly make. For anyone that did share their team on Twitter, I will be doing another video where I cover those sides as well. So be patient with me. Hopefully that will come on the weekend. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video. If you have, do go check me out on Twitter. Maybe your team could get into the next Your FPL Draft video. I've been JNO. This has been FPL Today. And remember, it's all about the game.